the dog's desperate bark to save his owner from death. Thomas adjusted the strap of his backpack as he hiked during the morning sun. The cool mountain air wrapped around him while golden light lit the trail that stretched upward, winding through dancing patches of grass that seemed to whisper in the breeze. The earthy scent of damp soil and fresh pine grounded him in the moment as he took a deep breath. Beside him, Echo, his loyal German shepherd, sniffed the air. The dog's ears were perked, and his eyes were unnaturally sharp, constantly scanning the surroundings. Echo was more than just an animal. He was a companion, a partner, a protector, and a living reminder of a past filled with both purpose and danger. Thomas was in his 40s, strong, his weathered face marked by years of experience. His once dark hair was now touched with silver at the temples, and a short beard framed his square jaw, a symbol of resilience. His eyes carried both warmth and the heaviness of old memories. Though his body remained firm, there was a hint of fatigue in his movements, as if the weight of the past still rested heavily on his shoulders. He wore hiking boots, sturdy cargo pants, and a long-sleeved shirt, all practical clothing worn during countless outdoor treks. On the other hand, Echo embodied strength and agility. His black and tan coat shimmered in the sun, highlighting his muscular build. His large, proud ears stood erect, and his deep brown eyes held both intelligence and unwavering loyalty. A small scar along his right side hinted at the dangers he had faced in service. Despite his powerful appearance, there was a softness to Echo's demeanor when near Thomas. The bond between them could be felt deeply, forged through years of shared belief, mission, and survival. They had served in the military together. Echo had been a search and rescue dog, trained for disaster zones, dangerous operations, and saving lives with precision and courage. Thomas was his handler, their work built on mutual respect and shared experience. Together, they had saved lives in some of the world's most dangerous places: earthquake zones, flooded towns, and conflict areas. But those days were behind them. Now, man and dog were retired, though the memories of their missions lingered like shadows. The quiet mountains had become their sanctuary, a place of peace away from the noise of the world. Hiking was their shared ritual, a way to stay grounded and connected. The rhythmic crunch of boots and paws on gravel brought calm to Thomas's mind. But inside, a silent battle raged. The doctor's voice echoed in his head, clashing with his heart. Years of high-stress missions had taken their toll. Now he was supposed to watch for signs, but Thomas trusted Echo's instincts more than anything. Echo had a near-supernatural sense for danger, whether it came from the outside or from within. "Looks like we're off on another adventure," Thomas said quietly, lifting his head as a gentle wind rustled the trees. Echo's tail swayed slightly in response. Thomas smiled. Echo's presence always brought comfort, as if the dog could feel his thoughts without needing words. The path grew steeper. Then suddenly Thomas's vision blurred. He blinked and shook his head, trying to clear the fog. The sun, once comforting, now felt heavy. His heart pounded fast. A deep, unpleasant pressure built in his chest. He instinctively pressed his hand to it. "Just tired," he whispered, barely louder than a breath. But the storm inside him raged. Echo moved a few steps forward, ears twitching. He froze. Something was wrong. His instincts were screaming. Thomas took another shaky step, trying to keep moving. His boots scraped against the rocky path. He staggered, his stomach twisting, and grabbed a nearby rock for support. "Come on. Just a little farther," he muttered. But the pain only grew, spreading from his chest to his jaw. Cold sweat drenched his back and trickled from his temples. He hesitated, then looked up. The summit was close, but now it felt impossible. Echo returned to his side, his eyes filled with concern. He let out a low whine and nudged Thomas's leg with his nose. "I'm okay, buddy," Thomas said, voice strained. But he didn't even believe himself. The pain struck again, harder. His knees buckled. He collapsed onto the ground, sharp gravel digging into his hands and knees. He gasped for air, but his chest felt tight, locked shut. Echo suddenly barked, loud and sharp. The sound echoed through the forest. He circled Thomas, alert and focused, barking again, louder, calling for help where none could hear. He turned to Thomas and nudged his face gently. "Echo?" Thomas whispered, his voice almost gone. His eyes were dimming, the world growing darker around the edges. He needed help. Echo knew. He had been trained for emergencies like this, though never one where his partner was the victim. Earlier, it was in just such circumstances that he had to act. With trembling fingers, he grabbed the dog by the neck, still standing perfectly still and watching him with intense focus. Thomas's lips moved slowly as he struggled to find one word, the command they had used many times throughout their lives in service missions. It meant Echo had to go for help. Echo's ears twitched at the sound of the word, his familiar body tensing as he processed the order. He sniffed Thomas one last time, as if for reassurance about his condition, then barked briefly, acknowledging the command without hesitation. He turned and ran down the trail. Thomas watched him leave, his vision gradually fading. He tried to lie on the cool ground and breathe through the pain, his mind drifting back to memories of missions they had shared, reminding him of the time Echo found a trapped victim after an earthquake and brought rescuers. Now it was Echo's turn. Relying on the dog was his only hope. "You can do it, my boy," he whispered before his eyes closed and he fell. Echo's paws kicked up dust and stones as he worked at full speed, sniffing for any sign of hikers. His mind was sharply focused. The mission burned into his instincts. He had to find help. The forest stretched endlessly before his eyes, but Echo didn't lose heart. He crossed a narrow stream at a good pace, water splashing underfoot, cold against his skin. He paused briefly to listen, the chirping of birds in the distance, the wind rustling trees, but no human voices yet. He pressed on. Suddenly he froze, ears up, nose twitching. A low growl rumbled from deep within him as a massive brown bear emerged from the bushes. The bear, angered, stood on its hind legs, towering over the ground. Echo instantly recognized the threat. This was no fight he could win. But the confrontation had begun. The bear let out a deafening roar, birds scattering everywhere. Echo barked fiercely, hoping to scare it off, but that only seemed to enrage the beast. It lunged forward. Echo darted sideways, barely avoiding the massive claws. He sprinted, weaving through trees and leaping over fallen logs. Pain shot through his body as an old wound reopened, his old scar bleeding, the metallic scent mixing with his fur. But he didn't stop. The bear eventually lost interest, falling behind. Echo stumbled into another stream, its cool water easing the burn of his wound. He drank quickly, then moved on, determined to complete his mission. The slopes became steeper and more dangerous. The trail narrowed. But Echo, using all his training and instinct, pressed forward. Fatigue weighed on him, but he climbed rocks, crossed another creek, and finally emerged from a dense thicket. Then he caught a faint scent. His ears perked up. Yes, humans. He followed the trail urgently, soon coming upon a small group of hikers resting by a clearing, laughing and chatting casually. They noticed the approaching dog as he barked loudly. "What a surprise! Where did he come from?" one of them exclaimed. Echo barked again, backing up a few steps, then turned toward the trail, looking back at them. "I think he wants us to follow," said a woman, frowning. "Yeah, something's not right," added another hiker. The dog wasn't just barking. His intense stare and repeated motions made it clear. The hikers quickly gathered their things and followed him. Meanwhile, Thomas's breathing had grown shallow and erratic. His chest rose and fell in uneven intervals, as if each breath cost him a great effort. Though majestic in form, his spirit drifted, surrounded by the soft rustle of leaves and distant birdsong, his mind hovering at the edge of consciousness. Echo returned, pacing around Thomas to protect his body, hyper-aware of every sound. His protective instincts were razor-sharp, and his devotion unwavering. He nudged Thomas gently with his nose and let out a soft whimper, anxious. Thomas stirred slightly, his eyelids twitching. For a brief moment, his cloudy eyes recognized the familiar figure beside him. His lips parted just enough to whisper, "Good boy." A forced surge of emotion, gratitude and relief, flickered across his lips, a faint attempt at a smile. His eyes, still unconscious, briefly fixed on Thomas's face, as if to confirm silently, "He's still here." Echo stood tall, ears alert, nostrils flaring as he detected the approaching scent. People were coming. The forest aroma mingled with the incoming scent of humans, echoed around him. This time his bark was shorter, sharper, more deliberate. An emergency alert. The group of hikers emerged from the trees, their expressions shifting from curiosity to alertness as they took in the scene before them. "Oh my, what happened here?" one of the men exclaimed as they rushed forward. Echo's stance relaxed slightly. He realized help had arrived. They had finally reached Thomas. Though access was limited and rough, they found him. Thomas still had his eyes closed, unmoving. Echo never left his master's side. A man in his 30s, with a backpack slung over his shoulder, knelt beside Thomas. He quickly assessed him, pressing 2 fingers to his neck to check for a pulse. "He's alive, but it's weak," he said gravely. "We need to call emergency services now." A woman nearby nodded, already pulling out her phone. Her hands trembled slightly as she dialed the emergency number. "Yes, we have a man here, unconscious, in serious condition. We're on the mountain trail," she reported calmly, then gave their location as precisely as possible. In the meantime, other hikers did what they could. One man took off his jacket and gently placed it over Thomas to keep him warm. Another checked his breathing and carefully turned his head to keep his airway clear. His voice was faint but clear. Echo watched everything closely. His body remained tense, but there was a calm determination in his eyes. He lay down next to Thomas, staying close. The wound on Thomas's side was severe, but it was nothing compared to the danger they had faced. Echo had fended off a bear. There were no other threats now. His only concern was to stay with Thomas. "Take care of yourself. That dog brought us here," the woman said gently, looking at Echo with admiration. Without him, who knows how long it would have taken to find this man. A respectful silence followed. Thomas looked fragile, but somehow peaceful. One of the hikers nodded solemnly. "He's a hero," he said, reaching out to stroke Echo's head. But he froze as Echo stared at him, not with hostility, but with a clear message. "I'm not leaving him, not even for a second." Time stretched endlessly as they waited. The hikers spoke in low, respectful tones, fully aware of the seriousness of the situation. Finally, the faint sound of helicopter blades echoed through the valley. Relief washed over everyone. The rescue team approached quickly, uniformed professionals descending from the helicopter, which landed in a nearby clearing. They brought medical gear and a stretcher. The lead paramedic knelt by Thomas and began a detailed assessment while another set up oxygen. "Vitals are weak but stable," the medic said. "We need to lift him carefully." Echo followed their every move. As they began to treat Thomas's wounds, one of the medics noticed Echo. "This dog's injured too," he said. "We'll need to check him out. Looks like he's been through a lot." "He brought us here," one of the hikers explained. "He saved his master." The medical staff nodded in understanding. "We'll take care of them both. They're safe now." As they lifted Thomas onto the stretcher and toward the helicopter, Echo hesitated on the edge of the platform, ears twitching nervously at the sound of the rotors. One of the medics gently reassured him. "It's okay. You're coming too. Echo jumped aboard and settled beside Thomas, placing his head near his chest. As the helicopter lifted off, his eyes remained open, watching over his friend. Despite his own pain and exhaustion, he stayed still, refusing to relax until he knew Thomas was truly safe. This had been his mission, his purpose, and he had completed it without fail.